Fox. I'm director of the Center for School Reform at Pioneer Institute. It's a Boston-based think tank, and because the air conditioning is on, and I hope that everyone, both students and judges, will kind of project outwards so everyone in the back can hear.
Good afternoon. I'm Millward Simpson. I'm the director of the Wyoming Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources.
I'm Stuart Harris. I have no nameplate because I went on a recent trip to the Bronx and it was taken from me.
If you could introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Good morning, Your Honors. My name is Keith Watson. I'm here with my teammates Keely Linger and Austin Chakowski with our teacher, Mr. Bader, and we are here to testify for Unit 1.
Great, thanks so much. So this is Unit 1, Question 1, and I'll read the full Unit 1 question as well as all of Question 1. Unit 1. What are the philosophical and historical foundations of the American political system? Question 1. The British Constitution has been described as evolutionary and as a tapestry deftly woven and embellished over time. Are those fitting descriptions? Why or why not? Which are the most significant of the documents that make up that tapestry? Why? What is the relationship of these documents to the concept of limited government and the rule of law? Timer, you may begin.
These are fitting descriptions. Unlike the United States Constitution, the British Constitution is unwritten. It is a collection of various important statutes, common law, and political customs and traditions. Queen Elizabeth II references this patchwork in saying, "The British Constitution has always been puzzling and always will be." Since the British Constitution is unwritten, it is changed simply by an act of Parliament. This allows the British Constitution to evolve more quickly and easily than the United States Constitution, which has a specific and challenging amendment process outlined in Article 5. One of the most significant documents that make up the tapestry is the Magna Carta, created in 1215, because it provides for rule of law between the monarchs and the citizens. The Magna Carta also ensures trial by jury, petitioning the king, and due process. British historians of the Magna Carta, Danny Danziger and John Gillingham, wrote, "As a symbol of the struggle against tyranny, it will always retain its value." The Magna Carta limited government and ensured rule of law, largely through its 39th and 40th chapters, which state, "To no one will we sell, to no one will we refuse or delay right or justice." This limits the king's powers of acting arbitrarily. Chapter 39 assures that no free man shall be imprisoned unless by the verdict of a jury of his peers or by the law of the land.
This provision was later strengthened by the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679 by giving the imprisoned the right to challenge their imprisonment by requesting a judicial review of their sentence by a local magistrate, which limited government and provided rule of law. Additionally, rule of law was applied to all subjects in the 1628 Petition of Right, which stated that no man of what estate or condition that he be shall be deprived of liberty or property without the due process of law. The Petition of Right also requires that only Parliament tax the people and bans imprisonment without cause, martial law, and the quartering of soldiers. The principle of rule of law, as bolstered through these documents, was asserted in the 1765 King's Bench case in Tick v. Carrington, which held that the state may only act as authorized by the law of the land. The English Bill of Rights of 1689 is an integral part of the British Constitution that limits government. Many of its enshrined rights are in the United States Constitution, such as the prohibition of excessive bail and cruel and unusual punishment, the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances, and the right to bear arms. Many of the rights in the English Bill of Rights not pertaining to individuals contribute to the idea of parliamentary sovereignty, the concept that Parliament rules above all other branches of government.
The British Human Rights Act of 1998 codified many of the rights of individuals, including those agreed upon by the European Convention on Human Rights, which share some rights extolled by natural rights philosophers such as John Locke. These rights include life, freedom, security, and property. Guaranteeing natural rights also lends a hand to ensuring a limited government. This is one example of the British Constitution evolving with the public opinion, as there is no higher law limiting Parliament's ability to create law. As such, the British unwritten Constitution is more of a living document than the United States Constitution. These documents all limit the power of government by preventing the monarch from abridging the rights of the citizens. Much like our government, limited government and rule of law are essential to the British Constitution. The American Justice Joseph Bradley once wrote in his Dissent to the Slaughterhouse Cases, "England has no written constitution. It is true, but it has an unwritten one, resting in the acknowledged and frequently declared privileges of Parliament and the people, to violate which in any material respect would produce a revolution in an hour." Thank you, Your Honors. We're ready to take your questions.
Great. Sir Edward Coke authored the Petition of Right of 1628, which you referenced in the introductory remarks. What did our founders learn from the Petition of Right about legislative power?
Well, legislative power is certainly an important power that needs to be checked in the total government and in its powers that are given to it by the people in a social contract. And it also needs to ensure the government, certain rights to the American people, or to any people under a government.
The founders learned through the Petition of Right that it's crucial that the representatives of the people have the power to levy taxes, as that gives them the control to be able to make sure that there's not excessive funds being collected from the people, and that ultimately the government is responsible to the people and how they use their money.
And also that this taxation is founded with the consent of the governed, extolling popular sovereignty.
Which is shown through our Constitution, Article 1, with the legislative branch.
What is meant by the phrase rights of Englishmen? How are these rights established?
The rights of Englishmen are established through all the unwritten documents that make up the entire British Constitution. And these rights include the Petition of Rights, those rights in them, the right to bear arms, petitioning the government, excessive bail and fines and punishment, and any rights dating back to the Magna Carta of due process, trial by jury, and rule of law.
The concept of the rights of Englishmen is a very crucial one for our founding, because the rights of Englishmen were what the colonists were deprived of, and as they were deprived of these rights throughout the history of colonial times, as they adapted to having them when they controlled more of their own government, they saw themselves less and less as Englishmen and more as Americans that were part of a separate entity from England. And that deprivation of those rights of Englishmen is ultimately what drove the colonists to create their own nation.
An example of this is shown in the Sixth Amendment with the local jury of one's peers, where one of the grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence was that the trial by jury was still having colonists shipped off back to England, and for the trial to happen there, where the trial wouldn't occur with people who were living under the same circumstances, but were under more control of the British Crown than of self-government, which they had in their colonies.
And this is crucial because as more laws were introduced that the colonists didn't agree with, such as the Navigation Acts, people began to be shipped off to England in secretive courts such as the Star Chamber to be dealt with privately, so that the people couldn't step in and actually have a say in whether they felt the laws were fair, and use such powers as jury nullification to exercise those beliefs.
You mentioned that the British Constitution can be much more quickly amended than the U.S. Constitution, but I wonder if that's true given our power of strong judicial review, given the way the Supreme Court seems to exercise it with increasing frequency and even relish, one might say. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly there is a big aspect of policy making in our judicial system, with policy making through the cases of Brown 2, with the Charlotte case of busing, as it was stated by one of the associate justices that busing is nowhere in the Constitution. But that's not really an official amendment to our Constitution. It's an interpretation of the Constitution, and an interpretation of the Constitution through judicial review can be overturned by an amendment.
Which these amendments can only be done through a very rigorous process of 3/4 of state conventions, or state legislatures, or a national convention approving. And so with that, it makes it that much more difficult for the Constitution to be amended than the British Constitution, where all that it requires is for someone to, or a large group of people, to feel that a specific law that was passed is more important and should therefore be added to that Constitution.
Yeah, but I don't remember the ratification of that gay rights amendment. Do you?
No, that has not occurred, but
No,
there
but
is...
it seems like we've got a gay right in the Constitution now, don't we? Protection for gay rights.
I think that the reason that a lot of the rights come out over time and are interpreted differently is that culture evolves along with the Constitution, and that as we gradually evolve as a society and mature and to come to accept more people and see through our own stigmas, that we're able to apply the constitutional principles more fully to these disenfranchised groups.
And I agree with you if we had congressional supremacy like they have parliamentary supremacy, but we got 5 people in the Supreme Court that just changed the Constitution.
I think that's very open to interpretation because there is a case, Obergefell v. Hodges, that is being heard on Tuesday that's going to discuss the Equal Protection Clause and due process for the rights of gay marriage, which we will then find out exactly how influential the judicial branch can be as far as gay rights.
And I don't think it's true to say that the document changed, but I would think it's true to say that the people that are reading the document have indeed changed. I mean, you could say the same exact thing with finding what we would consider to be unthinkable to live without, the right of blacks to coexist in schools with whites. And at the time, some people saw that as an overstepping of judicial power. But the way I see it is that people have come to accept more of the Constitution and have become more willing to implement it. I see my time is up. May I finish my statement?
Yeah, sure.
And I think people have become more willing over time to accept the principles of the Constitution into their daily lives.
I'd like to thank you and your teachers and your parents for all of your hard work. This is really difficult material. It's especially difficult because you have a smaller panel. That really requires, when you've got a panel of 3, it really requires people to kind of wear lots of different hats and kind of have all the bases covered. And I thought you did a really good job with that. I thought that you touched on both Magna Carta and Bill of Rights that are in your introductory remarks, but you also hit the Petition of Right. I think you're only the 2nd or 3rd team we've seen this afternoon that has done that and really gave it its proper attention. And I was impressed in the Q&A portion with primarily, you might be the best team we've seen this afternoon in terms of constitutional application. I like the way in which you took the history, the knowledge of history, and kept on directing it back to specific amendments and articles. And on top of that, the way in which Austin in particular talked about the way in which culture influences the rule of law and politics. So you should be really pleased with your performance.
I appreciate a good, confident, strong opening statement. Appreciate that very much, and you guys definitely did it. And your presentation when you begin with a bang like that. These are fitting descriptions. You just said definitively that's what's going on here, and I really like the fact that it was a well-organized presentation. There was a good kind of logical progression to what you brought up when you brought it up in terms of the evolution of this tapestry we were talking about. It was great to hear you hit the petition. Right, just make sure that you're not too casual in rattling off everything that's in these. I mean, there were some very specific rights that were granted or grievances that were addressed in those 3. I don't think that the right to bear arms is in the petition. It was one of the things you kind of rattled off when you were going through it. So be careful to be precise about that. Also, you brought some good examples. You ended really strong as well. I thought that bringing up Bradley's very strong statement that there'd be a revolution in an hour was a very compelling quote for your argument that the British Constitution is strong and solid, despite the fact that it's not codified. So, excellent.
I don't know, I thought you kind of sucked.
I thought you kind of sucked.
It was a very impressive performance, and I enjoyed your repartee, and the fact you didn't let me push you too hard on the issue of judicial review. You pushed right back, and that was great. In fact, I wish we had a little bit more time. Is it Kylie? Keeley. And Keeley was going into the Obergefell case and the fact that it involves not just equal protection, but substantive due process, because substantive due process in the entire field of fundamental rights illustrates point that we were discussing, and that is that the Supreme Court can just, I think technically what we lawyers call it is they just make stuff up. They do. I mean, they just make stuff up. Now, if you want to look for a textual basis for that, you can talk about the Ninth Amendment and its open-ended treatment of individual rights. But without strong judicial review and without the willingness of the court to use it, then I'm afraid we might have a real problem here that the British address simply through parliamentary supremacy. They can change much more easily than we can. And without the safety valve of the Supreme Court being able to do things like the Brown decision, then I don't know if our Constitution would have lasted as long as it did. You have to have a certain degree of nimbleness, don't you? And that's how we do it through judicial review. They do it through parliamentary supremacy. And I don't know, I still think we're better than they are. Great fun.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coach?
Thank you very
Well
much.
done. Well done.
Thank you, sir.
See you all.
Yeah, 3 minutes. I had to get
That was, he's like a dad.
They were nice.